Alright, today's task is to replace the valve cover gasket on this Husqvarna LT19538 ride-on mower. The overhead valve cover gasket's leaking, causing oil to drip onto the exhaust and for it to smoke from there. This particular machine's been sitting for a year or two, hasn't been used, is a bit of a backup machine. It's time to get rid of it, so need to fix this smoking oil leak from the valve cover gasket, and we'll get into that. Pretty simple process. And while we're there, we'll adjust the valves as well. Alright, so what we'll need is a 10mm socket. I've got some feeler gauges there to adjust the valves later. That's the gasket I've got for it, gasket number, part number there. Some blades to clean off gasket material. I've got a bit of black, ultra black RTV, another scraper, some gloves, and a bit of degreaser to give it a lot of clean up before we start pulling it apart. So, alright, the first thing you need to do is get the bonnet off this Husqvarna. Pretty simple process. Undo the wiring harness for the headlights there, and she just tilts up and pops off from the brackets down there. As you can see, quite a lot of oil leaking out of that valve cover. I suspect the cover's warped a little bit, but we'll give it a good look and clean up. That's the evidence of the oil leaking onto the exhaust there and causing a bit of smoke. So first, because this thing is so dirty, we don't want to get any of that crud inside the engine. Give it a bit of a spray down, a bit of degreaser, brake clean. I'll let that soak up for a bit and give it a quick scrub off with the brush. 4 bolts, 10mm. Let's get these bad boys off and have a look. See what we've got in there. Oh, that was nice and tight, that one. Oh, wow. Okay, so there's a very thin bead that wasn't doing anything much at all. As we can see, there's some old gaskety type material there, no doubt. Give this a clean up, and being as careful as we can, not to mark or damage any of the aluminium material there, and we'll get that new gasket on, give it a bit of seal on either side, and hopefully that fixes our problem. So there's the cover itself, cleaned up pretty well. We'll give it a good wash out to get rid of all that debris and stuff, but used a little bit of a wire brush just to get some of that stubborn gasket material off, but that should do the job nicely. Alright, onto the block itself. We need to be a bit more careful with this one. I've got a blunt paint scraper here. We'll start with that and just slowly work our way around to get this material off. I probably will end up using a razor blade, but let's just see how we go with the old blunt paint scraper. Really don't want to damage the aluminium anywhere around here. We will be using sealant again, but if we put a nick or a notch in those, it won't seal properly. Just softly with this thing. Don't want to make any marks, just very light pressure getting off that thin layer of sealant. Alrighty, so there we have it. Pretty clean. There is a bit of a nick in the aluminium up there, but I think that'll be alright. A few little spots of residual gasket around underneath, nice and clean. That brush just very soft, just to scratch off that gasket material. So we'll get it. Alright, here's the gasket part number. It's a GA Spares GSL 6905. Fits Briggs and Stratton 21 and 28 CDI overhead valve engines. OEM number is 272475S or 272475. GA Spares in Australia. Can't remember how much this was. It was probably $10 or something. Oregon part there. So let's get this gasket out of the bag and some sealant onto the block and cover. Alright, I'm going to put a bit of Permatext black RTV gasket on both the cover and the block. Try not to make too much of a mess here, but yeah, pretty self-explanatory. Just smooth it around. I am going to put a bit of gasket RTV on the block surface itself as well, just in case we've got any nicks in there or any imperfections that need to be filled up. So this should really give us a belt and braces type of job, making sure that we don't get any more oil leaks out of this cover. All important down the bottom here. I'll probably go a bit heavy down there just to make sure we get a good positive seal. Okay, Permatex Ultra Black RTV around the block and also on the cover. It's just a thin layer, really just to help the gasket seal if in case there's any imperfections in the cover or the block itself. We'll sandwich the gasket in between these two and make them up, see how we get on. Pretty simple process, aligning the holes. There's a bit of RTV in the holes, but that shouldn't matter at all. What we'll do is once we get these together, we will tighten them up snugly, let it set up for a few hours, and then come back with a bit more torque on those bolts. All right, all important. Let's make sure she's up the right way, and we'll get this top one started. Just by hand, nice and smoothly. Make sure she's going in. That feels good to me. All right. Just repeat the process for the remaining four, making sure that we do line up the gasket with the holes. This is looking good to me. Just loosely at first, I'm going to go diagonal and slowly tighten up just to make sure that that gasket and RTV does compress at an equal rate or thereabouts. Definitely nowhere near as precise as a head gasket, but it just pays to follow the same processes. I can now see some of that RTV is starting to squeeze out the sides, so that will be my cue, I think, just to leave the torque where it is for now. I'll let that set up for a few hours or maybe even overnight, and come back and snug it up tightly. All right, so there we have it. Pretty quick and easy job. Overhead valve, cover gasket replacement. Put a bit of RTV silicone on there, Permatex Ultra Black. Hopefully that seals it up and stops our problem of oil leaking onto the muffler and creating smoke. I'm going to leave this sit for a few hours or perhaps even overnight, and come back in the morning, snug up those bolts and give it a test run. So anyway, really easy job. Probably only takes 20 minutes or so. Didn't need to adjust the valves. They were pretty much bang on 4,000s. I always put my valves at 4 and no issues there. So anyway, I'll continue cleaning this thing up for sale. So stay tuned for some more videos.